People often underestimate how powerful a quiet, steady voice can be in a world addicted to noise. When the internet latches onto a phrase like Elon Musk's mother wrote this, what really travels isn't just the name recognition or the curiosity attached to fame, but the hunger people have for wisdom that feels earned rather than manufactured. The idea of a mother speaking after decades of living, raising children, failing, surviving, and rebuilding carries a gravity that no viral slogan can fake. It reminds us that behind every public success story there is usually someone who learned patience the hard way, who understands that strength is rarely loud, and that resilience is not something you declare but something you practice daily. Often when no one is watching, the deeper importance of such a message lies in timing. We live in an era where people are pressured to bloom early, succeed quickly, and display constant confidence. Many feel invisible if they haven't made it by a certain age. A voice shaped by a long life cuts through that anxiety. It suggests that growth is not linear, that setbacks are not detours but part of the road itself. It reassures people who feel late, tired, or unsure that progress does not expire. When a mother speaks from experience, she is not selling motivation, she is offering perspective. And perspective, unlike hype, does not fade after a few hours. There is also something quietly radical about valuing the words of an older woman in a culture that often sidelines both age and femininity. Society celebrates youth while fearing aging, praises ambition while ignoring endurance. A mother who has lived through multiple careers, economic uncertainty, personal reinvention, and public scrutiny embodies a truth many prefer to avoid: life is long, unpredictable, and demanding, and success rarely looks the way it is advertised. Her message resonates because it does not promise ease. It promises continuity. It says you can be tired and still continue, uncertain and still move forward, afraid and still act. What makes such reflections powerful is that they don't center on extraordinary genius or rare talent. They emphasize habits, mindset, and self-respect. They speak about showing up even when applause is absent. About learning to be comfortable with starting over. About refusing to internalize rejection as a verdict on your worth. These are lessons learned not from a single breakthrough moment but from repetition. They come from applying for opportunities and hearing no, from working in rooms where you are underestimated, from balancing responsibility with personal ambition. When people read or hear such words, they recognize fragments of their own struggles inside them. Another reason these messages matter is because they redefine success. Instead of presenting it as a finish line, they frame it as a relationship with yourself over time. Success becomes less about comparison and more about alignment. Are you living in a way that allows you to respect yourself? Are you learning instead of hardening? Are you willing to evolve when circumstances demand it? These questions feel especially relevant now, when so many people measure their lives through curated images and metrics that ignore context. A mother's long view exposes the illusion in that. It reminds us that most meaningful progress happens quietly, unevenly, and often invisibly. There is also an undercurrent of permission in such words. Permission to take risks without guaranteed outcomes. Permission to fail without self-betrayal. Permission to age without apology. Many people, especially women, grow up internalizing the idea that they must choose between ambition and likability, strength and softness, work and family, youth and relevance. A voice that has navigated these false choices and survived them offers relief. It says you do not have to compress yourself to fit a narrow script. Life is not a single role, it is a series of seasons, and you are allowed to change with them. The importance of the message also lies in its refusal to glamorize struggle while still honoring it. It does not say pain is beautiful or that hardship automatically makes you wise. Instead, it acknowledges difficulty as something that exists whether we romanticize it or not. The value comes from how we respond. Do we let challenges shrink us, or do we let them teach us adaptability? Do we carry bitterness forward? Or do we extract insight and move on? This kind of realism is comforting because it respects the reader's intelligence and lived experience. There is something deeply grounding about advice that does not try to be clever. It doesn't rely on trendy language or dramatic declarations. It speaks plainly about discipline, curiosity, and self-trust. It encourages people to keep learning, not just professionally but emotionally. It suggests that staying open-minded is one of the most underrated survival skills. In a world increasingly divided by certainty and outrage, that humility feels almost rebellious. It invites reflection instead of reaction, patience instead of panic. Such a message also reframes fear. Instead of treating fear as a stop sign, it treats it as information. Fear becomes a signal that something matters, not proof that you are incapable. This perspective can be life-altering for people who have been waiting to feel fearless before acting. A mother who has lived long enough knows that fear rarely disappears, it simply becomes more familiar. Courage, then, is not the absence of fear but the decision not to let it run your life. That idea alone can unlock stalled dreams and quiet regrets. The generational aspect cannot be ignored. When wisdom flows from one generation to another, it creates continuity in a world obsessed with disruption. It reminds us that innovation does not mean erasing what came before. It means building on it. A mother's voice connects past and future, grounding ambition in values. It emphasizes character alongside competence, integrity alongside intelligence. These are qualities that do not trend on social media but determine the quality of a life. Another subtle strength of such reflections is how they normalize uncertainty. Instead of presenting life as a series of confident choices, they admit that many decisions are made without full clarity. You choose with the information you have, you adjust when you learn more. This takes pressure off people who believe they must have everything figured out before they begin. It encourages movement over perfection. It validates experimentation, curiosity, and resilience over rigid planning. There is also an implicit reminder that identity is not fixed. You are not the same person at 20, 40, or 70, and that is not a failure. It is growth. A mother who has reinvented herself more than once embodies this truth. Her story challenges the fear that changing direction means admitting defeat. Instead, it frames change as responsiveness to life. That idea can be liberating for anyone feeling trapped by past choices or external expectations. What makes the message more important than you think is how quietly it counters despair. In times of economic uncertainty, social tension, and rapid technological change, many people feel unmoored. They worry about relevance, stability, and purpose. A grounded, long-view perspective does not solve these problems, but it offers psychological footing. It says you are not weak for feeling overwhelmed. You are human in a complex world. And it reassures you that adaptability, not certainty, is what carries people through. There is also an ethical dimension. Advice shaped by a lifetime tends to emphasize responsibility, not just ambition. It acknowledges that success affects others, that how you treat people on the way matters. It reminds us that reputation is built slowly through consistency, not quickly through performance. In a culture that often rewards shortcuts, this emphasis on character feels both old-fashioned and urgently relevant. Another reason such a message resonates is that it dismantles the myth of overnight success. By highlighting years of effort, rejection, and persistence, it restores dignity to the process. It helps people see their current struggles not as evidence of failure but as part of a longer narrative. This shift in perspective can change how someone wakes up in the morning. It can turn exhaustion into endurance, frustration into focus. There is also comfort in knowing that even those connected to extraordinary success have lived ordinary human experiences: doubt, financial stress, loneliness, and uncertainty. This humanization matters because it closes the gap between them and us. It reduces envy and increases empathy. It allows people to learn without idolizing, to admire without diminishing themselves. The message also quietly challenges ageism. It insists that value does not decline with years, it evolves. Experience becomes an asset, not a liability. This is especially meaningful for people who feel pushed aside by younger trends or newer technologies. It reassures them that wisdom, adaptability, and emotional intelligence remain relevant, often becoming more so with time. At its core, such a reflection is about self-respect. It encourages people to take themselves seriously without taking themselves too seriously. It balances humility with confidence, ambition with patience. It suggests that the most important relationship you will ever manage is the one with yourself over decades. Trends will change, roles will shift, people will come and go, but that internal relationship requires care, honesty, and forgiveness. The absence of bitterness in such messages is also striking. After decades of navigating challenges, resentment would be understandable. Yet the tone is often pragmatic rather than resentful, hopeful without being naive. This emotional maturity is perhaps the most valuable lesson of all. It shows that you can acknowledge hardship without letting it harden you, that you can move forward without needing to rewrite the past as either heroic or tragic. Another layer of importance lies in how it speaks to parents and non-parents alike. For parents, it reflects the quiet labor of supporting others while still honoring your own identity. For those without children, it offers mentorship without obligation, guidance without hierarchy. It becomes a reminder that wisdom is not owned by a role but earned through engagement with life. The message also underscores the importance of health, discipline, and self-care over the long term. Not in a superficial way, but as a foundation for resilience. It implies that taking care of your body and mind is not vanity but strategy. Longevity, energy, and clarity enable opportunity. This practical wisdom often gets lost in more glamorous narratives but proves essential over time. There is something deeply reassuring about advice that does not rush you. It does not demand immediate transformation or dramatic change. It suggests small, consistent actions compounded over years. This aligns more closely with how real change happens. It respects human limits while encouraging growth. It tells you that you do not need to become someone else, you need to become more fully yourself. Ultimately, the importance of such a message lies in its quiet insistence that life is not a performance. It is a practice. You show up, you learn, you adjust, you continue. Some days are productive, others are merely survived. Both count. In a world that constantly asks, "What have you achieved lately?" a long-view perspective asks, "Who are you becoming?" That question lingers longer, shaping choices in ways metrics never can. When people share and reread words attributed to a mother who has lived fully and visibly, they are not just seeking inspiration. They are seeking permission to breathe, to slow down, to trust that their story is still unfolding. They are looking for reassurance that worth is not measured in headlines or timelines. That reassurance, quietly offered, is indeed more important than it first appears. What often goes unspoken in reflections like these is how much restraint they require. It takes restraint not to dramatize pain, not to center yourself as the hero of every chapter, not to exaggerate lessons for applause. A lifetime teaches you that exaggeration weakens truth. Real wisdom tends to be quieter because it does not need to convince, it simply recognizes. That recognition resonates with people who are exhausted by constant performance, who are weary of being told to optimize every aspect of their existence. A calm voice that says, in effect, keep going, keep learning, keep your dignity, lands differently when it comes from someone who has done exactly that for decades. There is also an important lesson embedded in how such messages frame responsibility. They do not encourage entitlement or victimhood. They acknowledge unfairness without surrendering agency. This balance is difficult, especially in times when many feel betrayed by systems larger than themselves. Yet the long view suggests that while you may not control circumstances, you always retain control over your response. That idea can feel uncomfortable because it removes excuses. But it is also empowering. It restores a sense of authorship over one's life, even when the plot takes unexpected turns. Another subtle but powerful element is the emphasis on learning to be alone with your thoughts. A mother who has lived through eras without constant digital distraction understands the value of reflection. She knows that clarity often emerges in silence, not noise. This contrasts sharply with modern habits of seeking validation, answers, and identity externally. The reminder that you can sit with uncertainty, think things through, and trust your own judgment feels almost countercultural. Yet it is precisely this skill that allows people to make decisions aligned with their values rather than their anxieties. The message also carries an implicit critique of speed. Not everything should happen quickly. Some things need time to mature, to fail, to be rebuilt. When people rush growth, they often miss depth. A long-lived perspective understands that patience is not passivity. It is an active commitment to staying engaged without forcing outcomes. This reframing can relieve the constant pressure to be ahead and replace it with a focus on being present and prepared. There is also wisdom in how such reflections treat recognition. They neither chase it nor reject it. They understand that visibility can be fleeting and unreliable. What lasts is competence, character, and consistency. This is especially grounding for people navigating careers in volatile industries or public-facing roles. It reminds them that while applause can open doors, substance keeps them open. When recognition fades, as it inevitably does, you are left with who you are and what you can do. Building those quietly becomes an act of self-respect. Another important dimension is how these messages address comparison. A lifetime teaches you that comparison is endless and rarely useful. There will always be someone younger, richer, more celebrated, or seemingly happier. Measuring yourself against others erodes contentment without guaranteeing improvement. Instead, the focus shifts inward. Am I better than I was? Am I learning? Am I living in a way that aligns with my principles? This internal metric fosters steadiness in a world that constantly invites envy. The message also validates nonlinear paths. It reassures those who have taken breaks, changed careers, paused ambitions for family or health, or started over after loss. It reframes these not as deviations but as chapters. This matters deeply to people whose lives do not fit clean narratives. It tells them their story is not broken, it is simply complex. That validation can restore confidence that has been quietly eroded by societal expectations. There is something profoundly stabilizing about advice that acknowledges seasons of invisibility. Not every period of life is meant for display or achievement. Some seasons are for recovery, learning, or laying groundwork. A mother who has seen long arcs understands that these quieter periods are not wasted. They are often where resilience is built. This perspective can ease the guilt many feel when they are not producing or progressing visibly. The tone of such messages also models emotional regulation. Instead of reacting with outrage or despair, they respond with measured realism. This is not emotional suppression but emotional literacy. It shows that you can feel deeply without being ruled by those feelings. In a time when emotional extremes are often amplified, this steadiness feels like a form of leadership. It invites others to slow their own reactions, to consider rather than immediately respond. Another understated lesson is the importance of adaptability without self-erasure. Over decades, you learn that clinging too tightly to one identity can become a liability. Yet adapting does not mean abandoning your core values. The balance lies in knowing what is flexible and what is not. Skills can change, Roles can change. Values anchor you. This distinction becomes clearer with age and experience, and it is invaluable in a rapidly changing world. The message also gently dismantles the idea that confidence must be loud. Quiet confidence, built on competence and self-knowledge, proves far more durable. It does not seek constant reassurance. It allows room for doubt without collapsing. For people who feel pressured to project certainty they do not feel, this redefinition of confidence is liberating. It suggests that honesty with yourself is a strength, not a weakness. There is also an implicit encouragement to cultivate gratitude without complacency. A long-view perspective appreciates progress while recognizing unfinished work. It acknowledges privileges without denying struggles. This balanced gratitude grounds ambition rather than dulling it. It fosters appreciation for what is working while still striving for improvement. That balance is rare and valuable. Another aspect that resonates is the normalization of effort. Effort is not framed as punishment but as participation. You work because you care, because engagement gives life texture and meaning. This reframing counters narratives that portray effort as something to escape. It suggests that fulfillment often comes not from ease but from involvement, from investing yourself in something beyond comfort. The message also speaks quietly about boundaries. Over time, you learn that saying no is as important as saying yes. Energy is finite. Attention is precious. A mother who has balanced multiple responsibilities understands the cost of overextension. Her perspective validates the need to protect time, health, and focus without guilt. This is especially relevant in a culture that equates busyness with worth. There is also wisdom in how such reflections treat regret. Instead of obsessing over missed opportunities, they emphasize learning and forward motion. Regret becomes a teacher, not a prison. This approach encourages self-forgiveness, an essential skill for long-term well-being. It acknowledges that you made the best decisions you could with the information and resources you had at the time. Holding yourself hostage to the past serves no one. Another powerful undercurrent is humility toward the future. A lifetime teaches you that certainty is fragile. Plans change. Markets shift. Health fluctuates. Relationships evolve. This does not breed pessimism but preparedness. It encourages flexibility. Savings, learning, and emotional resilience. It suggests building a life that can absorb shocks rather than pretending they will not come. The message also quietly champions curiosity. Staying curious keeps the mind agile and the spirit engaged. It counters stagnation and fear. Curiosity allows you to approach change with interest rather than dread. This mindset becomes increasingly important as the pace of change accelerates. A mother who remains curious models lifelong growth, defying stereotypes about aging and relevance. Another dimension is the emphasis on kindness without naivety. Experience teaches you to be discerning without becoming cynical. You learn to help without enabling, to trust without surrendering judgment. This balanced kindness sustains relationships and self-respect. It is neither sentimental nor hardened, but grounded in reality. The importance of such a message also lies in its invitation to redefine legacy. Legacy is not just what you build publicly but how you influence privately. How you treat people, how you model resilience, how you respond to adversity. These quiet legacies ripple outward in ways you may never see. This perspective shifts focus from external monuments to internal impact. There is also reassurance in the acknowledgement that exhaustion is part of the journey, not a personal failure. A long-lived voice understands fatigue intimately. It encourages rest without surrender. It validates the need to pause without quitting. This is particularly meaningful in a culture that glorifies burnout while offering little support for recovery. Finally, such messages remind us that meaning is cumulative. It accrues through small choices repeated over time. There is no single moment that defines a life. There are patterns. Showing up. Being honest. Learning. Adjusting. Continuing. When people absorb this idea, pressure softens. Life becomes less about proving and more about participating. This is why words shaped by decades carry a different weight. They are not urgent, but they endure. They do not promise shortcuts, but they offer footing. In a world constantly demanding more, faster, louder, a steady reminder to live deliberately, patiently, and with self-respect becomes not just comforting, but necessary. In the end, the quiet power of such a message is that it brings people back to themselves. It pulls attention away from noise, comparison, and fear, and redirects it toward responsibility, patience, and inner steadiness. It reminds us that a life is not something to rush through or constantly explain, but something to inhabit fully, even when it feels uncertain or unfinished. That grounding sense of presence is often what people are truly searching for when they look for guidance. There is a deep comfort in realizing that you do not have to be extraordinary every day to live an extraordinary life. Consistency, integrity, and curiosity compound in ways drama never can. Over time, these quiet choices shape character, relationships, and self-trust. When you stop demanding constant proof of progress, you begin to notice how much you are already becoming. Such reflections also leave people with a gentler relationship to time. Time is no longer an enemy to outrun, but a partner in growth. Mistakes lose some of their sting when seen as part of a longer arc. Delays feel less like failures and more like invitations to refine, to prepare, to deepen understanding. This shift alone can change how someone carries themselves through the world. Perhaps the most enduring lesson is the reminder that worth is inherent, not earned through visibility or achievement. You matter even when no one is watching, applauding, or approving. Living in alignment with that truth creates a quiet confidence that does not depend on outcomes. It allows you to move through life with less fear and more clarity, and so the message lingers, not because it shouts, but because it stays. Long after the excitement fades, it continues to influence how people think, choose, and endure. In a culture obsessed with immediacy, that kind of lasting influence is rare. That is why it matters more than most people realize.